But first, a scene of horror and carnage in the Tasmanian town of Port Arthur tonight, where as many as 25 people have been shot dead in Australia's worst massacre. At least 15 people are wounded, and the gunman, who's still holding police at bay, is thought to be holding at least one person hostage. Most of the victims are reported to be tourists visiting the historic penal colony at Port Arthur.
Helicopters began ferrying the injured to Hobart from Port Arthur after a gunman opened fire there this afternoon.
We've had a gunman run amok on the Port Arthur historic site. That's 85 k's from Hobart. It happened mid-afternoon. There are at least 12 confirmed dead, if not 22. There's a further 15 injured. At the moment we have a hostage-to-siege situation which we're attempting to contain and control.
The convict ruins are a favourite with interstate and overseas tourists. It's understood those visitors have made up the bulk of those killed or wounded. Locals near the site cringed in fear inside their shops and homes as the gunman opened fire.
Everyone's just freaked out.
What do you understand he may have done?
Kill lots of people.
Any idea why?
No idea.
Any idea who he was?
No idea. Not a local, I don't think.
Do you know if any tourists have been involved?
Yes, there have been.
Oh, it just sounds awful.
It is awful. It's very, very awful.
A few minutes ago, reports put the death toll at 25 dead. It's understood the gunman is a 22-year-old armed with a machine gun. What sparked the massacre isn't known at this stage.
Shockwaves around the world as the toll from the Port Arthur massacre climbs to 35.
The bam, boom, bam, and everyone fell down. Was 4 dead here, 2 dead there.
Police arrest the gunman. Now the questions. Why did he do it? And why was he allowed such a deadly weapon?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to this special one-hour edition of 790 News, incorporating Today Tonight, live from Port Arthur. Later, a full bulletin of local and world news with Anne Forward. But first, no words can express the horror and disbelief in this little Tasmanian tourist centre tonight. Port Arthur has become a town of crisis, of wounded crowded into hospitals, of police desperately trying to piece the massacre together, and of families shattered by tragedy.
Less than 36 hours after the gunman went on an indiscriminate rampage, the death toll stands at 35. The worst massacre by a single civilian in world history. The killer himself is in hospital with some of his victims. He was captured, his clothes ablaze as he ran from a burning building.
The horrific massacre at the historic penal settlement began without warning.
They did the gunshots.
Having murdered 32 unsuspecting local residents and tourists, the snipers stopped at a bed and breakfast lodge 5 kilometres north of the convict settlement and took 3 hostages, a couple in their 70s and a man who was earlier forced into the boot of a BMW and driven to the guest house. That car was later gutted by fire. Inside the Seascape Lodge, the man, armed with several high-powered rifles, continued firing at police, who were trying to negotiate by phone.
Our principle at the moment is to keep the house isolated and the people in it contained within the site, and we're hoping to open negotiations again. They've broken down because of some technical problems. A battery, I understand, and a phone that he had in the house ran out.
Has power to the house.
It's as simple as that.
Victorian Special Operations Group police flew in to surround the house, where they lay in wait until dawn.
It's a pretty horrific sight from what people in there at the moment, and it'll take quite some time to work through this, so I just hope you bear with us and give us a little bit of room to move.
What about the number of injured?
Well, it's very difficult to say. It's dark in there at the moment, and as I said, my people are trying to work through the site and locate anybody that has been killed other than the ones we've already found.
Then, at 8 this morning, police were taken aback when they saw the Seascape Lodge burst into flames.
The upstairs portion of it is on fire, and there are flames coming from partly down on the lower level on part of it. It's starting to slowly spread, I understand. There are still shots being fired, so at this stage I've given instructions that none of our personnel are to approach the house.
30 minutes after the fire began, the gunman himself walked out of the cottage, his own clothes on fire. He was immediately arrested by heavily armed Special Operations Police.
The person has been taken into police custody, conveyed to the Royal Albert Hospital, suffering from burns, no gunshot wounds.
The killer was taken by ambulance to a Hobart hospital. Under police guard, his head covered. He was wheeled into casualty and will face court as soon as his doctors allow. For 2 hours today, police escorted us to see the results of the killer's rampage. The house where his 3 hostages died was still smouldering. Having arrested the gunman, aged in his late 20s, police soon realised there were no survivors in the house. It burnt to the ground, leaving only the chimney and iron veranda post standing. The 3 hostages who died inside the cottage take the unbelievable death toll to 35, Australia's worst shooting massacre.
I think carnage is the simple way to describe it. It's probably the only single word that I know that would describe what was experienced in there.
The tourist region will reopen to the public in the next few days. The sudden and appalling slaughter now added to the region's already dark history. At Port Arthur, Dean Allen Craig, 7 Nightly News.
And this afternoon, news cameras were allowed back into the Port Arthur ruins to follow the trail of tragedy left by the gunman. Darren Linton joined the convoy through the Port Arthur killing fields.
The lone gunman, armed with a high-powered semi-automatic rifle, opened fire first at a restaurant in the heart of the picturesque Port Arthur penal colony.
There's the gunshots.
20 people died during the first terrifying minutes. Some didn't even flee, thinking the shots were part of the Sunday afternoon show.
We thought the site must have been a reenactment of some kind. We weren't told about it, but we usually are always told about it, so...
Police are still formally identifying the bodies in the restaurant, and they will remain at the scene until later tonight.
In a number of locations, it could be best described as 3 predominant locations within the restaurant.
Some still at tables? How would you make it?
Yes, there were some still at tables, appearing as though they were still eating their meal.
The rampage continued as the gunman set his sights on a bus nearby. He shot a passenger through the front window and 3 other people standing outside.
It's not make-believe, it's real. I've seen bodies.
It was here, as the gunman drove out of the park, that he shot dead a mother and her 2 children, sisters aged 3 and 6.
Police came across the body of a woman and her 3-year-old daughter lying on the roadway, and the body of the 6-year-old daughter was behind the tree. It's our understanding that the mother was carrying the 3-year-old baby when they were both shot, and the 6-year-old ran away trying to escape and was shot in the process.
The children's father later arrived distraught at the police command post. By now, police and other emergency services were on their way to the scene, treating the many wounded as best they could and trying to limit the carnage.
It's horrendous, catastrophic. It's just beyond even thinking about, particularly anywhere, not let alone Tasmania.
But more blood would be spilled. At the toll gate marking the entrance to the park, bloodied blankets mark the spots where 4 men died, apparently shot for their BMW, after the gunman abandoned his yellow Volvo on the side of the road.
Everyone's just devastated.
I suppose everyone's lost a friend, I suppose.
Everyone knows everyone in the country.
By now, police had begun evacuating the area, including this crowded restaurant 10 minutes away.
Well, we had a call about 2:30 saying that there was a gunman going rampage and had shot at that stage 25 people who was coming our way, and for us to stay away from our windows and to be aware of what was happening. So we actually had to call our 30 people we had in the restaurant at that stage, let them know what was happening, and most of them rushed upstairs into the house and in terrible fright and up the back into the bushes. And it was quite an horrific experience. 1
more person would die. In Port Arthur, a woman leaving the general store shot through the front windscreen of her car. The 29-year-old gunman then drove to the Seascape Bed and Breakfast to play out the final chapter in his grisly saga. In a few short minutes, he'd left behind 32 dead and 16 wounded, even pausing to fire on helicopters attempting to rescue the injured. Making it harder to accept the carnage is the fact that there is still no motive, no inkling as to why the gunman visited this horror on a quiet Tasmanian community.
Superintendent Jack Johnson has been in charge of police operations. It's been a massive task. David Johnson spoke with him a short while ago.
Not quite finished for us yet. So far we're quite content with the result, of course, but unfortunately it's a very nasty event by whatever measure you apply to it.
But the operation from your point of view went well?
Oh yes, we've been able to resolve the issues quite satisfactorily.
Now, when you arrived at the scene here, I understand that you described the scene in the tea rooms as something like war.
I was very perturbed when I went into those facilities down there in the restaurant because whilst I haven't seen a war zone, that's what I've seen on the television and depicted in other arenas as being a war zone.
And some of the people were killed while they were sitting there eating?
And they appeared to have been taken completely by surprise, slumped over beside their meals.
Must have been a shocking scene for you.
It was quite horrific.
And what about your members? I mean, are they in shock now as well?
A lot of people have been very grossly affected by a number of the scenes of this particular incident, and we're going to great lengths to ensure that everybody is provided with as much support, debriefing and counselling as we can possibly provide.
Superintendent Jack Johnston. As residents of Port Arthur relive the massacre, some remarkable stories are emerging. They're tales of bloodshed and lucky escapes, and of astonishing acts of bravery.
With the dead outnumbering the survivors 2 to 1, there aren't many who can tell police exactly what happened at Port Arthur yesterday. Those who can have told of how they'll be haunted by their narrow escapes. Hobart woman Karen Jones said tourists thought the sound of gunfire was part of some historic reenactment at the infamous penal settlement.
It was just like a cannon going off. We thought it was all part of the show. We were going down to check out what was going on, you know. Thought it might have been a little bit of extra on the side, so like you get the tours around there, and we thought, well, they were letting off cannons. And
her boyfriend, Philip Milburn, says the shooting was not as random as initially reported.
I mean, if we walked past him and we went the other way and he went to the shop, I think, well, if he got out of the car and started shooting straight away, well, we might have been the first, maybe.
The shock of their encounter with the gunman was still setting in today as they recounted the panic of the scramble to safety.
A pregnant lady, Karen, she was there. She just couldn't stop vomiting. She was sort of panicky. There was an old guy upstairs. He'd lost his wife. He couldn't find her, but they found her downstairs.
He just, because he couldn't get downstairs, too many people, and everyone sort of passed the message on. They found her.
So there would have been people in there who may have lost loved ones, who didn't know what had happened to their loved ones.
Oh, easy.
Among the others facing danger, helicopter pilots, forced to fly through gunfire during the airlift of casualties.
Well, I was requested by the paramedic to fly as low as possible, which is not an unusual situation, as we normally get involved in that type of accident or in people with chest injuries. We are used to that, and sometimes, luckily yesterday the weather was not a problem, so we were able to comply with that request, and we came all the way below 1,000 feet.
At least 5 of the survivors who crossed the gunman's path are yet to tell their stories. They remain in a critical condition here at Royal Hobart Hospital, but doctors are confident they will pull through.
I mean, they're seriously ill. I mean, are being monitored constantly, and we are hopeful, you know, that over the next sort of 48 hours or so that their results will be good.
Of the 13 others wounded, 11 are described as satisfactory and 2 have been released.
We have a plan here which is called a Code Brown. It's an emergency plan that was put in action and in place in 45 minutes. The overall performance of all staff, from the medical staff to the catering staff, have been brilliant.
Hospital staff have been praised for the way they coped with the emergency, management denying rumours that some nurses refused to treat the gunman. Adam Walters, 7 Nightly News.
And ahead in this special edition of 790 News, live from Tasmania, Australia reacts to the horror of Port Arthur.
And calls from around the nation for a massive crackdown on gun ownership. Welcome back live to Port Arthur. While pictures of this rampage have gone live around the world, details of the killer remain sketchy. He's known to be intellectually handicapped, in his late 20s, and unlicensed to carry a gun, let alone a lethal automatic rifle.
I honestly thought that maybe half-jokingly we said we'll be lucky to get out of this one alive, and that's honestly what we thought. But in the back of your mind you say it as a joke, but there was meaning behind it, and apparently I was right.
A chilling encounter with an alleged mass murderer. Gary Sprigg will never forget the painting work he did on the alleged Tasmanian gunman's home last year.
And the things he was saying about me and the things that I could hear that were going on in the house, and I just knew things weren't right.
Could you hear the gunfire?
It was just like a cannon going off. We thought it was all part of the show.
Karen Jones and de facto husband Philip Milburn could have been the gunman's first victims. He arrived at Port Arthur as they prepared to tour the nearby ruins. They were just metres apart.
Do you think you were lucky?
Yep, I do.
Oh, I mean, if we walked past him and we went the other way and he went to the shop, I think, well, if he got out of the car and started shooting straight away, well, we might have been the first, maybe.
So who is this man behind Australia's worst massacre? He lived in this quiet street. Neighbours unaware the man said to be either mentally unbalanced or schizophrenic was capable of murder.
I think maybe he was just a very quiet person that kept to himself, yeah.
Never seen him carrying weapons or anything?
No, I never seen anything like that, no.
Did you know that he had guns?
No, I didn't know that either, no. I didn't know he had guns.
So it must be a hell of a shock to you.
It is a shock, yeah, it is a shock.
Yeah.
Great shock.
And this is where the alleged killer lived, in this rambling two-storey house, largely hidden by overgrown vegetation, in a modest, middle-class suburb in northern Hobart. Neighbours remember the man as being quiet, a loner, seen sometimes walking his dogs. But others have told us they remember him quite differently.
Just that he was he'd talk about younger children, younger people, in a way that a normal person wouldn't talk. Senses you just know, but just that it wasn't right.
The alleged killer remains in Hobart Hospital, but slowly a more detailed picture of the man and his motives is being drawn. For some, this nightmare will never go away.
I mean, yeah, there is a couple of things that happen down here, but you don't ever think it's going to be as bad as this.
And as details of the gunman emerge, there's a theory he was bent on revenge. Dean Felton has this report after he spoke to a friend of the killer.
Jodie Hodgett grew up in Port Arthur, knew the man who's now in custody for the killings, and even went horse riding with him. She describes him, even in his teenage years, as a social outcast, unable to mix and cared for mainly by his younger sister.
Definitely mentally disabled to a point where he was not very social.
Today she recalled that he often travelled with a surfboard strapped to the roof racks of his car, even though he didn't surf. And his general demeanour she described as like that of an 8-year-old boy.
I feel sad for his family. I feel sad on a whole that something wasn't done before he did this to us.
One of the gunman's victims was a girlfriend of Jodie's who still lived in Port Arthur.
There hasn't been a lot of names released as yet, but I do know some of the people that are dead.
Jodie's parents live and work in the immediate vicinity of the massacre, and she spent several anxious hours yesterday fearing her parents were among the victims.
Gentleman, had he have taken a different turn, he could have gone past my parents' house, or he could have gone up to where my father was working and taken hostages from there just as easily as he took hostages from the hotel.
Now Jodie is simply hoping no more of her friends are among the dead.